I'm with Jim Crumley, and Jim is an author of, would it be about 20 or 30 books, Jim?
23, I think, at the last count.
23. Well, I'm rather envious. It's one of my ambitions to have a book published, which I never have at the moment. But what may be quite nice, Jim, is just for these 8 or 9 minutes to concentrate on a personal philosophy of yours concerning the mountains. Mm-hmm. So what is that?
Well, one of the lines that I'm using in the talk tonight is a line of Norman McCaig's, and it's from a poem called High Up in Sullivan. And the line is, there are more reasons for hills than being steep and reaching only high. And I guess what a lot of my work is about is exploring those other reasons. In my years of just wandering wild places, I've formed quite a strong attachment for the American school of nature writing. And in particular the sort of Native American attitudes towards wild places. I very often like to write about the relationship between people and wild places, and particularly the historical one, how deep that was, how much we have lost and how much we might be able to regain in terms of getting a closer relationship with mountains. I did a little trip to Alaska a few years ago to make a couple of radio programs for the BBC, and it was exactly that theme about the relationship between people and wilderness. I came back with a head full of ideas about Scotland must have been like this 1,000 years ago, or maybe more than 1,000 years ago. And in particular, this thing about a reverence for mountains that goes beyond just something that you climb, something that allows you to say that you've climbed another in the list of Munros or whatever it is. But something goes beyond that. I'm not really talking a religious thing, but there is, I mean, historically there have always been peoples who have placed their gods in mountaintops, and I have a lot of sympathy with that idea. I suppose I like to explore what, for want of a better word, is a sort of spiritual aspect. I don't mean by that I hold prayer meetings in mountains or anything like that, because a great deal of my work is done on my own. I'm pretty much a sort of lone wolf in terms of the time that I spend in the mountains. There's a kind of reason for that. It doesn't mean that I'm antisocial, I'm not particularly, but if you go into mountains in company, then your first loyalty almost is the tribal loyalty, so you interact with the people that you're with. And even if you discuss the mountains, you're discussing it among people. And I find that when I'm on my own, that the relationship with the mountain is a much more intense one. And I have favourite mountains that I go back to again and again and again. I think it suits me to do that rather than to collect all the Munros, for example. I have favourite places that I think I get sort of more out of as a writer, and I go back and I rework the same circumstances over and over again. Really, what I'm looking for is the mountain secrets.
Yeah. Now, with man's association with the mountains, Jim, it sounds as if in your philosophy that the different cultures that now exist, those cultures would perhaps have differing associations with the mountains and differing beliefs?
There's an awful lot more common ground, I think, than we sometimes think. One of the things I've done, it's a slight sidetrack, but one of the things I've done over the years is I've spent a lot of time writing about swans, done a lot of work with swans, and a thing that I find the mythology of swans is in every continent in the world. Maybe not Africa, but I think all the others. And what I find is when you go into the mythology of swans, you find the same stories, you find the same details, even the same stories, again and again and again, right across the Northern Hemisphere, from Siberia to Scandinavia to Gaelic Scotland and Ireland to North America. You find the same things over and over and over again. And you find something similar in attitudes towards mountains. One of the things that I'm going to be speaking about tonight is the original ascent of Everest. And the word that went round the world in headlines was Everest conquered. But in fact, the two men who went on the summit, a New Zealander and a Himalayan Sherpa, both took offerings to the top of the mountain. Tenzing made a hole in the snow on the summit and put in, I think it was biscuits and sweets and some lollipops. It was some food they had, and that was because Everest is a sacred mountain in his home country. And Hillary, representing almost, although he was a New Zealander, almost representing the West, and with at the request of John Hunt, put a crucifix in the snow. And these things are, this idea that you've done this remarkable human achievement, but really all you have done is climb to the top of something which has, always been there, for as long as geology has allowed it to be there. These two men, their response was not a feeling of triumph, but of gratitude. And you find that, you certainly find it in North America, you find it in Scandinavia, you find it in the north of Russia. And so I think there's, mountains, among native peoples particularly, I think mountains have a place which is, it's as old as the people are. It's a very, very powerful one. And I think it's it's very, very widespread. And I don't think there's a huge difference in the way that I suppose what you might call primitive societies responded to the presence of significant mountains in their own landscape.
Jim, I think I could talk to you for hours. We're unfortunately restricted to maximum of 10 minutes for this posting on YouTube, and we're coming up to 8. I literally would like to sort of carry on speaking and just prompting you an odd question, but in the last about minute and a half that we've got, how would you wrap up this very brief conversation?
Well, bringing it to the 21st century rather than dwelling in the time of primitive tribes, we put pressures on our mountains as we never have before. It's always seemed to me that in a mountain country like ours, the mountains are a very good barometer of the health of the land as a whole. And if the mountain landscape is in good heart, then the country tends to be in good heart. And we still look to the mountains for all kinds of things. Every single one of us that likes to look at a mountain, whether we climb it or not, has a responsibility to, look after the mountains and really, wherever possible, to allow nature to make decisions about them rather than ourselves.
Well, Jim, it's been a great pleasure listening to your philosophy, and also a great pleasure for me participating in this. So many, many thanks, and good luck with your lecture tonight. I'm sure it will be received very well. Cheers, Jim.
Cheers.